Welcome back. So we're kicking off our series on trading systems. So first two videos, there's no coding. We're going to go just purely project overview. So we're going to give you an idea of what the project is going to entail. The second video of our introduction is going to be focusing on the first service that we're going to be getting up and running. That is a data factory. So just as a reminder, first two videos, no coding, simply a project overview about what we're trying to do, different components. Second video, we're going to talk about the data factory. So let's get started. It wouldn't be finance if there wasn't a disclosure. So first things first is when we are building, a trading system, there are challenges with doing this, and there's a lot of complexities we have to take into consideration. So the biggest thing is you need to know the risk associated with using a trading system. A lot of people go into this thinking, oh, it's going to work 100% of the time. It's never going to have issues. Unfortunately, that is not the case. Anytime you build a trading system, you have to test it. You have to test. And when you are testing, you need to make sure you're only using money that you are okay with losing if there is not a paper trading option available. Ideally, you always use paper trading when possible. That should always be your first go-to option whenever you're testing a new trading system. Now, additionally, this really is kind of expected for an individual who is comfortable coding. I wouldn't expect somebody who has never coded in their life to really kind of go with this series. The reason why is we're going to be using a lot of different services. We're going to be using a lot of different concepts in general programming languages. And if you're not familiar with those concepts, unfortunately, you're really kind of lacking that skill set. So there are videos I had that will cover more of the basic, but I would really, and I highly recommend that only individuals who have a significant understanding of certain programming concepts actually follow this series. So just please keep that in mind. That's not to discourage you. It's just to point you in the right direction before you start going down this path, because there's a lot to it. And then additionally, you need to make sure you're going to be reading documentation. Code works sometimes. Over time, there is update to packages and things like that. That might mean you need to go and then change your code because the package has been updated. So you need to be comfortable adjusting your code to meet your own unique needs, but then additionally for common maintenance issues that will inevitably pop up as you use the system. So again, this is just more to inform you. It's more here to just give you an idea of some of the challenges that you will be encountering. Don't let that necessarily discourage you, but go in with that right mindset. That's the important part. Alrighty, so what is a trading system? So automated trading systems, also referred to as mechanical trading systems, algorithmic trading, automating trading, or system trading, allow traders to establish specific rules for both trade entries and exits that, once programmed, can be automatically executed via computer. In fact, various platforms report 70% to 80% or more of shares traded on US stock exchange come from automatic trading systems. This came from Investopedia. I thought that's great. I think it's a simple, nice overview, but basically what we're doing is we're taking our everyday trading strategies and we're automating them. But naturally, when you think about automating something as complex as trading, there's a lot of different components to it. So we'll go through some of those things. But before we get there, we do need to talk about the pros and cons of trading systems. So trading systems are great, but that does not mean they are perfect and they will solve all of your issues. So what are some of the pros? Well, some of the big pros, or at least I personally think is probably one of the biggest one, is it minimizes emotions. So people are greedy. People get scared easily. People panic sell. People stay in a position way longer than they should because, they're like, oh, it's going to keep going up. Ideally, with a trading system, you can define the rules of your trading. That trading system is going to follow those rules. So if you say get out after 3% profit, it will get out after 3% profit. So the nice thing about this is it tries to take away that emotional aspect from the trading process, because that's usually where people get bit. They either get out way too early or they get out way too late. And a lot of that has to do with the emotions that come into play when we are trading. Additionally, with a trading system, we can do something called back testing. And so basically back testing is applying the trading rules that we define for our system, but we apply them on historical market data. What this allows us to do is it at least gives us an opportunity to validate our trading strategy. It gives us information that potentially will tell us that whether it's a successful or unsuccessful strategy. Now, here's the biggest caveat of it all. Just because it works in historical data does not mean it's going to work in future data. So that's always the big caveat you hear pretty much in any type of statistics class or anything like that is, even though it can give you a gauge, it's not a guarantee. So you have to go in with that mentality that back testing is just giving you some more confidence, but it doesn't necessarily eliminate the uncertainty. Additionally, with a trading system, we can preserve discipline. We have rules for a reason when we develop a trading strategy. However, we often find that sometimes it's very difficult to be disciplined when it comes to following those rules. So that kind of goes back to emotion is we have rules, but we're not disciplined about following those rules. A trading system is going to help you stay disciplined, right? So it's kind of like working out. It's a lot harder to do it, but if you're disciplined, there's these kind of dividends that it pays over time. So the kind of analogy goes with that. We have these rules. If we follow those rules, there's benefits to following those rules, but we have to be disciplined and we have to make sure we're actually following them. The trading systems help us do that. Additionally, a trading system, another big benefit is improving order entry speed. Computers run fast. We've determined this. We can loop through millions of rows of data in just a couple milliseconds, right? So we've been here. We can make things go really, really fast. Naturally, we can take the advantages of that speed up and apply them to our trading strategy. So we can get in or we can get out really quickly. Now, naturally, that has actually kind of created its own subcategory of trading system, which is high frequency trading. High frequency trading is actually a very different aspect from a programming perspective. There, we're using very low level languages. We're all about speed, and there's a lot of different things that you have to take into consideration when it comes to getting in and getting out, making sure the order sizes are all adequate and things like that. So this will not be high frequency trading. This is just taking a trading strategy and putting it into a trading system. Very different components, so please keep that in mind. Diversifying trading. So automated trading systems permit the user to trade multiple accounts or various strategies at one time. We'll find that with a trading system, we have a framework that we can follow, and we can basically scale that framework, right? So we can say, hey, here's a single idea that we're implementing in our trading system. We can repeat that idea multiple times, and we'll just change little components about it. So this allows you to diversify your trading strategies where you can have strategy 1, 2, 3, and so on and so on. And each one of them could potentially be trading something a little bit different. So that's just some of the pros of a trading system. Since we have pros, naturally, we have cons. Cons, well, mechanical failures can happen. So this is something I see a ton with people, which is they go in with the intention that their system will never break. They'll never think that internet connections will be lost. They will never consider that the server that they're getting the data from will fail at some point, right? Things break. Technology breaks. I wish I could paint it a different picture, but that's just the reality of the situation. So to think that a trading system is safe from any type of mechanical failure, that's unfortunately not the case. And so that does present a risk. And things you can do is you can write your code to ideally handle a situation where mechanical failure can happen. But in some cases, you're going to have those situations. And so you're going to have to plan what happens when those situations arise. Are you going to have to restart your system? Are you going to have to rewrite some of your code? Don't necessarily, again, get discouraged by the idea that mechanical failures happen. Go in with the mindset that it's going to happen a couple times. That's okay. It's going to make your trading system more reliable over time. It doesn't mean it's going to necessarily eradicate that from happening, but it will happen from time to time. And the more complex your strategy, the more likely it can happen. So just be aware of that. That is a con of a trading system. Over optimization. This is another one. So although it would be great to turn on the computer and leave for the day, automating trading systems do require monitoring. This is because of the potential for technology failures. Oh, wait, I think I did it the other way around. Sorry, that was for monitoring. My apologies. So for over optimization, though not specific to trading systems, traders who employ backtesting techniques can create systems that look great on paper and perform terribly in a live market. Over optimization refers to excessive curve fitting that produces a trading plan unreliable in live trading. So we've seen this before in things like machine learning models too. You can make a very accurate model. The problem is you fit it to a very specific data set. The problem is, what are the chances that you're going to come across that specific of a data set in actual trading? Chances are probably pretty low. And so a lot of times we have to be careful not to over optimize our strategy because we're fitting it for a very, very, very specific situation that the likelihood of it happening is almost, none. So very important that we keep that in consideration. A lot of times people are striving, I got to get 90% accuracy, 95% accuracy. The reality is you might not be able to get that. You might only get a model that's 60, 65% accurate. But ideally, if you repeat this on a larger scale, you should be coming out ahead. So again, that's just something we have to consider. The final con, and this is again something people fail to recognize when they are building trading system, is they think, it's automated, so I never have to touch it again. Yes, that would be nice. But unfortunately, you do have to monitor your trading systems from time to time. There's things that can go wrong, right? And I kind of mentioned this with mechanical failures. You can lose power. You can lose connection to the internet. Your computer can crash. There's system quirks. You could be relying on a cloud service. The cloud service goes down. The problem is people want to start a trading system and then leave for the day and have no interaction with it until the end of the market. The reality is you probably can't do that. You have to have some type of monitoring in place. You have to have some type of system where you're checking it from time to time. I've seen people do text messages. I've seen people have emails sent. I've had people who just have a little dialog box pop up on their system. They have their systems in place where, if something does happen where they need to kind of jump and monitor it again, they make that process easier. So they go in with the intention that they're going to be monitoring it, and they're not afraid of that. They're actually developing their system with the intention to be able to monitor it from different locations. So please be aware of that. Things will go wrong. You need to be prepared for that. And you need to have your plan, basically. All right. So what's the project? What are we doing, right? So our goal is to create a full-fledged trading system that harvests data from different financial sources, cleans and stores that harvested data, leverages a machine learning model to generate signals, processes and submits orders to our broker, and then provides a simple user interface to manage our system. So we're going to have 4 different components of our project. The first one that will be the Azure Data Factory. So I'm going to be showing you how to create a data factory using Microsoft Azure. And with this data factory, we're going to create data pipelines that will take data from different sources. And we're going to set up automated processes that will clean up that data and then store it maybe potentially in some databases. And what the goal is with that data, we would then move on to our Azure machine learning services, where we're going to define a model. We're going to define a very basic model. We're not going to necessarily think it's the most accurate, but just showing the framework. How do we take this data? How do we make it useful? How do we make it where we can make informed trades that ideally follow some kind of strategy we developed? So we're going to be using Azure machine learning in order to take that data, plop it through a model, and ideally start predicting directions of stock movement. Additionally, we're going to be leveraging Azure functions too. This will, again, help us when it comes to Azure data factories, machine learning stuff. lots of different things like that, even interacting with our user interface. So it's a lightweight framework that we can use to help build these customizable bite-sized portions of codes that we can use to help us manage different aspects of our system. And then finally, we're going to have a simple user interface. So we're going to actually have a Azure web app service. So we're going to actually do a web application where we're going to take different components of our trading system and make them available in a user interface, albeit basic, nothing super, super fancy. But the idea is that we can manage our system using this web interface. So that's basically a high-level overview of our project. As we get to each different component of it, we'll go into more detail about that particular service and that particular component of the project. Alrighty, so here comes the fun part. It's really easy to say we're going to build a trading system. It's a whole different thing to actually build it and define a framework. And so when we think about a trading system, it really helps if we kind of break it down into different components. And probably the highest level we can start at is the trading system itself. So what is a trading system ideally made up of? Well, if we think about it, it's basically just a collection of strategies, right? So we can define each of these strategies and we can have them be part of our trading system. So they can be doing trades and checking for signals and stuff like that. So if we think highest level, a trading system is basically just made up of a collection of trading strategies. Now, what defines a strategy, right? Well, a strategy, if we want to kind of break it down to some of its core pieces, this might not be an exhaustive list, but if we wanted to think at least high level, well, we can say a strategy is a trigger, right? So we have something that naturally catches our attention and says, hey, wait a minute, maybe we should be kind of keeping an eye on this stock. Maybe there's an opportunity to open a trade, right? So our trigger would be considered our first component of our strategy. And then we would move to our next component of our strategy, which is actually opening a position. So we found this great opportunity. We think there's an opportunity to maybe extract some profit. And so we're going to open a strategy and hopefully make some money, right? So once we open that strategy, we need to manage it, right? So we have to make sure, is it going in the right direction? Is it going in the wrong direction? What's going on here? So there's a managing component with our strategy. Just because we've opened a position doesn't mean we can just walk away and never look at it again. We have to manage it. We have to know if it's going in our direction, going outside of our direction. We might need to adjust our stops. We might have to adjust our profit targets. There's lots of things that we might need to manage after we've opened a position. And then naturally, if we've either incurred too much of a loss or if we incurred a good profit, we're probably going to want to close that position. And so there's a closing component as well, where we might need to keep records of things or even do other things that require us to just keep an eye of it as we close it. Okay, so we have a strategy. We know a strategy is made up of 4 different components. Let's talk about that first component, which is a trigger. Well, a trigger, again, we can break it down into different components. And so basically the first component of a trigger is something happens on an event. What is that event? Well, we can take that event and we can actually even drill down a little bit more, right? We can say, hey, when these different conditions are all met, we have the proper situation where we might want to take a position potentially, right? So maybe we have a situation where the market's moving in our direction, or maybe we have a situation where the market's moving against our direction. So this is the events that are happening. You can have multiple situations that define an event, or you could have one situation that defines an event. Kind of just depends how complex or how simple your particular trigger is. Now, when we have a situation, we again have to go a little bit lower, which is, well, how do you define a situation? Well, at its core, it's just a collection of conditions, right? So my bull market situation is the RSI is above this level or the MACD is above this level. So I can have multiple conditions that define a situation. And I can have multiple situations that define an event. So that's kind of how we can think about it. And then we have an event, so something happened, and we're going to move on to our next component, which is defining a position. So maybe we need to get out, get in, something. It just depends. But once we've determined that something's going in our direction and we're saying, let's move, then we're going to define our position. That normally just entails defining our order, the order type potentially. It might also determine how much of a position we want to take. There might be just different components that define our particular position. And then once we've defined our position, we're going to take our position. Now, taking our position could be just as simple as just submit the order, or you might want to make it where, well, wait until we reach this situation where the price is a little bit above the trigger price, right? So again, it just depends how complex or how simple your particular trigger is, but the logic is still kind of the same as for an event, which is there might be multiple situations you're looking for, and you're going to define those situations by multiple conditions or maybe a single condition. And basically all you're doing is you're just trying to see, if those situations are met, then that's great. It means take my position. Now, the reason we're doing this is because we're trying to break down a trading system to its bare bone components, right? This is a complex topic. We need some type of structure as we're going into this. It might not work perfectly, but it will give us something to start with. It might not give us that final component, but it's giving us something to play with. It's giving us something to follow that won't, make us pull our hair out, to put it nicely. Now, the other thing about triggers is they don't last forever. Just because we have a trigger doesn't mean it's going to constantly be there. And so there might be a situation that we're also looking for, which basically says, hey, our opportunity to take a position, it might be gone, right? Or it might be a situation that, hey, once we've taken that position, we might need to stop looking for that particular trigger. So again, it's the same type of logic. There's going to be situations you're probably looking for, and those situations are made up of conditions. Opening. Okay, so we have a trigger. We now have moved into that opening of a position component. So now we need to define, what does an opening look like? Well, if we, again, break it down into different components, we have three. We have our take profit, which basically says, hey, at what point am I happy with the profit that I made from this position? And then we have an initial stop. So at what point have I lost too much money where I'm like, get me the heck out of here? And then we have the actual execution component, which is basically just submitting the trade. There's really not too much to it. Now, when it comes to defining our take profit and our initial stop, we're going to normally use formulas in order to do that. Now, again, those formulas could change depending on who you are and how you trade. Some people might define profit a little bit differently. Some people might define risk a little bit differently. So again, it kind of goes back to, how do you want to trade, right? How do you define your take profit, right? And how do you define that formula? The most important thing is that you have some type of formula that you can use to help identify, in at least a program, what you're aiming for when it comes to profit. So again, it's one of those things where you can define it however you want, but you need to be able to define it because you're going to have to write code that leverages it. Okay, managing, right? So this is that managing component. It can kind of get complex just, again, depending on how you're trading. You might have a take profit like we talked about. We might have a stop loss. And those particular phases could actually span multiple phases, right? So your profit could actually be phase one, get to this point. Phase two, get to that point. Phase three, get to that point, and so on and so on. Same with a stop loss. You might have multiple times where you're having to readjust your stop loss as you're moving up in price potentially, right? So sometimes you might have multiple phases of your stop loss, and then other times it's literally going to just be, a one and done. There's also that time component. Some people don't want to be in trades too long, or some people only want to manage those positions as the market is open, right? So if it's after market, get me the heck out. I don't want to be in there. So there might also be a time restriction that comes to managing your component, your order. And that usually has to do with people who want to trade during certain market periods. And that, again, varies depending on who you are and how you trade. So this is how we can think about managing our trades. Then we get closing. So close, it's actually pretty simple. You close out the position, and then normally you're going to have some type of record keeping process in place which will allow you to keep records of your trades, how well they did, how poorly they did, just things like that, where you can do some further analysis if needed. So to put it nicely, it can get complicated. If this is kind of how we are thinking from start to finish, what a trading system can look like. Now, some of you might look at this and go, oh my God, what am I getting myself into? It seems, I would say, complex, but just think about this for a second. We've done this before. I think what intimidates people is they're going like, wow, there's so many different things we have to take into consideration. Don't necessarily look at it like that. Look at it in its individual components, right? So you have a strategy. A strategy is made up of 4 different components. When you start thinking of it like that, that makes it a little bit easier when it comes to actually defining your trading strategy and your trading system. Now, I've also been very specific here when I'm talking about my trading system. I'm looking at it purely in the terms of a strategy, but as we've already talked about, a trading system isn't necessarily just a strategy, right? There might be other components beyond that aren't actually with the trading aspect. There might be a data collection process, right? So we talked about getting our data and cleaning our data, right? So that could actually be considered a component of our trading system as well. But I think for most part, if we're going to talk about just purely the trading aspect, this is probably our best approach for at least giving us a narrow framework that keeps us focused. Now, when it comes to data cleaning, when it comes to building a web interface, yeah, they might be a part of our trading system, but they're kind of their own little silos. So they're kind of the bigger part of it, but they're kind of can operate independently in a sense, right? So you can have a web interface, doesn't necessarily have to go with a trading system. So just keep that in mind. I am keeping this very focused because the last thing I want to do is already take something as complex as this and make it even more complex. But do keep in mind, if I really want it to be kind of super, I guess, in detail, I would actually include some other components to it. So with that being said, that actually finishes our first video in our series. In our second video, guess what? We're going to go to the Azure Data Factory. So the second video, we're going to, again, just give an overview. What is the service? What are we going to be leveraging from it? And how do we need to think about it? And then after that, we will actually start interacting and building our first data factory. And then additionally, I am going to actually do something a little bit different in this series. One complaint I have gotten from people is the data sources from TD Ameritrade and Interactive Brokers aren't the most reliable. Surprise, surprise. I think part of it is, again, they're not like a data specialist. I know they kind of mark themselves to be, but there's a lot that we have to work around when it comes to working with their data sources. So I will be showing you a new data source in this series. I'm going to be doing IEX. You do have to pay for that service. Again, I'm not going to necessarily say you have to go with them, but I do want to present that option. I think, if you are really serious about this and, you really want to start thinking about some of this stuff, sometimes you're just going to have to spend money. I mean, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I know we kind of always want to make it free, but sometimes you just have to spend the money because otherwise you're going to find yourself spending hours and hours and hours trying to get something that's never going to really work, trying to get it to work. So I will show you that. Again, I'm not necessarily saying you have to go that direction, but I think, when you're thinking about it, just consider the cost and the benefit of it. So at this point, if you have any final questions, feel free to put them down in the comments below. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. We always love having new subscribers. And if you feel this video was helpful or useful, feel free to share it as well. Additionally, I do have a GitHub page. I would recommend that you follow that because all the code that we're going to be writing for this series, it's going to be there. So I just want to make sure you have access to the code and making sure that it will be there for you. Now, I also have a Facebook page. I won't be putting the code for this on there, but if you want to also kind of just stay up to date with things I'm releasing and things like that, you might want to consider that as well. So thank you again for watching, everybody. We'll see you in video number 2.